Welcome back to Derry Public Radio. Reporting from the basement of the Derry Civic Center, this is Benjamin Graham with your news. The carnival is in town. Our field reporter spoke with a seasoned ride jock about what the fine people of Derry have to look forward to. The man tilted his bowler to the side and said, "We've got something for everyone, points and marks alike. The shies are stocked, the gazoonies are ready to turn the tip for a real Michigan bankroll. But," he added conspiratorially, "I'd stay away from Horror House unless you want to get 86'd. Well, listeners, as they say in the talk, you're listening to Derry Public Radio.
This is Derry Public Radio.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Derry Public Radio. I am Joshua Kahn, joined alongside Ben Graham.
Long days and pleasant nights, constant readers.
And CM Alexander.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you guys for tuning back in. This is our part 2 of Joyland, the conclusion of the hard crime novel, Joyland.
The action-packed-ish conclusion.
The detective novel with no detective. Or where the detective is not the main character. All right, we are super excited to get in here and uncover the things we felt about this finale of this book. CM, you gonna go ahead and take lead on this one again?
Yes, and I was really excited to talk to you both about this. Now I'm a little bit nervous.
Oh, don't be. I loved this book.
Awesome.
It took a while to get into, but I really enjoyed it.
Well, I feel like things started to pick up in the second half, especially compared to how kind of slow or just careful the first half was.
Almost immediately.
Yeah, building those characters. We pick back up with Devin washing and waxing the cars in the horror house. And at this point, we know that the Doors and Pink Floyd are not enough for Devin because he needs Linda Gray. And I'd like to start with him finishing his work on the cars and going further into horror house to look for Linda's ghost, because I was really delighted to read this passage, and I love it because it's one of the things that I feel is truly a Stephen King moment. And what I mean by that is he takes a simple description of something that isn't overly terrifying or exciting in any way, but he describes it in a way that just spooks the ever-loving shit out of me.
Yeah.
Please, what is this thing?
But what if a hand reached out of the darkness and goosebumps.
Yeah, just the way that he describes, he doesn't see anything, nothing really happens, but that really awesome spooky atmosphere is in there. He actually did the same thing to me with room 1408. He's describing the way the door to the hotel room looks, and I had to sleep with my light on, and I was like 28.
Yeah, that part was really great. The part directly preceding that, is that right? The part directly before that.
It, yeah.
Do I know how words work?
Preceding is correct.
Cool.
Gambit.
God damn. Last episode, we left off with Josh and I making our predictions of who the murderer was. And the section as Devin is going in to search for Linda Gray is preceded by him talking to Eddie Parks.
Eddie fucking Parks.
Who does everything in his power to rouse our suspicions.
Literally, it's the first section after we picked off from where we left off. And I started reading it, and his discussion with Eddie Parks made me go, take that, Josh. Stephen King's not even trying to be subtle here. It's so obviously Eddie Parks is the murderer.
I read that and I was like, fucking Ben got me. I was so sure.
The whole time, Eddie's like, oh, these are the gloves that the killer used. I never take my gloves off. I'm a dick, so I must be a killer. The whole time he's doing that, Lane Hardy is just being the most awesome, cool dude.
Right.
I feel like we need to cue the ominous music.
Yeah. Lane Hardy's he's such a cool guy.
He's been a total bro this whole time. Just like a super chill dude.
I just want to hang out with that guy, you know?
Get drinks with Lane Hardy.
Yeah. Spoiler alert.
We're dudes, we'll be fine.
Ooh. Anyway.
We come to the end of Devin's workday, and he's walking along the beach back to his room when he sees Mike, Mom, and Milo trying unsuccessfully to fly a kite. I did just give Milo credit for helping with the kite. I'm gonna stick with it. So Devin ends up approaching them. He helps with the kite, and that kind of wins over Mike's mom a little bit. And their exchange was really interesting because for a 21-year-old guy, and no offense to our 21-year-old listeners, male listeners, if there are any out there yet, but he is pretty perceptive when it comes to Mike's mom, Anne, because Mike has no boundaries and he just wants Devin around. He's got something he really needs to tell him. We find out why shortly. But he's putting his mom in all of these really awkward positions, and Devin is just smoothing it over each time.
As someone who used to be a 21-year-old male, you don't need to apologize to them. They are not smart. They are not. Devin is preternaturally cool with Annie. I loved every single scene between Annie and Mike and Devin. The relationship, the slow build of trust between Devin and Annie. The scene flying the kite was very heartwarming.
One of the things that Stephen King does that I really love is when he's getting the kite ready and he takes a look at it and he just picks it up and he sees a big Jesus on it. And he has that moment and they're like, it's an inside joke. I was like, go on. I am very interested to find out what this inside joke is.
Don't worry about it.
And then once they don't come right out and say it. They don't spell it out, but they give you all of the context clues to figure it out once you find out that her dad is a televangelist. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's good stuff. That's a great inside joke.
Her dad, a character I was surprised did not play a bigger role. I kept expecting him to show up and play some role in the end game, and then he is never seen in person. Kind of surprised me.
Yeah, I made a note about that because he fulfills that character that we get so frequently with Stephen King, that religious zealot, and when I started to hear about him, like, oh, okay, here we go, here it is, and then nothing. Which was a bit of a relief, actually.
Honestly, it was.
I think the father is just an explanation for why they can have all this money in this big place.
Yeah.
And Annie doesn't have a job, and and her son has all these medical problems. I think he's kind of a Deus Ex Machina to be like, well, this is taken care of. Don't worry about it. He's a big deal.
He also it explains a lot about Annie's character. And is part of the reason why I grew to love the character of Annie is that she's kind of a badass.
That's true.
She grew up in this religious background and was the one to say, I'm gonna go party and not worry about it. And it was one of the many things about Annie that I was like, she's so hard when we first meet her, and it's because she's had to do so much of this raising Mike on her own, and just a really strong character, I thought.
For as much as I really liked Devin and I enjoyed the story that he told, this would have been really cool if it was from Annie's perspective, if it was her story. Or Anne.
There are several characters I feel like I would rather have read this story from their perspective. Devin is arguably the least interesting character in this book.
He's our everyman, the person we can sort of place ourselves in.
And that's why these other characters can be so extraordinary, is because he is so a guy. Like, he's just, he's a 21-year-old heartbroken guy, and we can all relate to something. He's a blank enough canvas that we can find something about him that we relate to.
Exactly. We've all been a dog in a costume.
You're still not letting that Baloo thing go, are you?
I just wanted to play Baloo. Disney, get at me.
Okay, so Devin gets invited to join them the following morning for breakfast smoothies, at which point we get our long-awaited, beloved Dark Tower tie-in, because Mike has the sight. Ben, I'm looking at you.
I wrote down, that was my first note of the entire book. Huge letters. Mike has the fucking Shining. I was so excited. I loved it. I love Mike. He's such a great character. I love any book or movie or anything where they have a little kid that'll cuss and crack
I was going to say drop
wise.
the F-bomb.
Like that's an instant win for me. And hey, if they have The Shining, all the more.
So, would one of you like to talk about this clue that Mike is giving Devin, the thing he really wants to tell him?
It's not white.
That it's not white.
I have a thing to say about that later. I have a bone to pick with it. But for now, I'm curious what both of you thought about that. Did that mean anything to you?
Nope.
I thought maybe it was an Alice band, like it's not white or it's
Yeah, we know it's blue.
Yeah, it's blue.
Yeah, gotcha, buddy.
It's a terrible
White.
clue, Mike.
I couldn't figure it out. Okay, so anyway, we can come back to that. But Josh, you look like you have something you want to talk about.
Yes, I do. So in this conversation, we find out what is finally wrong with Mike, that he has a rare kind of muscular dystrophy and that he had pneumonia last year. So on top of already being sick, he went through something that, wore his body out pretty much. So this is why they're there in the first place, is because he can breathe in the air here and it's nicer here. The climate's better for him. And he's trying to heal. And the thing that I thought was really neat was that when Devin makes the comment about how, he seemed so young yesterday flying this kite, and now I look at him and he looks so old. Mm-hmm. Like when you can see that the struggle he's going through is really, really weighs on him. And I thought that was just like a neat juxtaposition to put those things back to back of seeing him old and young.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, his characterization is... he's kind of an old soul too.
Mm-hmm.
Not just like physically looking like ragged, like the way he behaves because he has this second sight, because he has The Shining. He has access to so much like adult thoughts that he seems well older than his years.
Yeah, it's like he's come to terms with the burden of knowledge that he has.
He's a classic Stephen King, the wise mystic character.
He reminds me of Jake after a couple of books.
Yeah.
Jake, did Jake also have The Shining, or was that just the terrible, terrible movie? So I feel like this is a whole different discussion.
We can't even, we gotta move on
Circle
from that.
back from that.
We will do an entire episode on how much I hate that goddamn movie.
This area is also where the
Love
first
you,
time...
Elba.
I guess the second time, because the first time I said fuck you, Ben, was during the Eddie Parks, and I was like, God, it's fucking Eddie. Now, this is the second time I was like, fuck you, Ben, because there's the conversation with the quote where Devin is talking about Annie, and he says, a smile lit her face. It was so brilliant, you could almost look how it never reached her eyes.
Kingism. I have that
damn it.
in my notes.
I was so mad.
Double underline. I told you.
First, blue chambray shirt. Then there's...
Believe me, it is not going to be the last time we hear either of those phrases. And there will be more, and I will be sure to point them out when I remember
every
what
time.
they are.
Oh, God, it's so rough. And then
I love it.
Yeah.
I still love that phrase. I know we talked about it the first episode that we talked about it. I forget which one. But I think it's an evocative phrase. Even though I try to do that face in the mirror sometimes. I try to I'll do it for the audience. I
Nice.
That's great for an audio.
It really,
excellent
really
podcast.
comes through.
And then we have Mike talking about wanting to go to Joyland, like that, and that kind of brings him back to being a kid. We see him go back and forth real fast. And I thought that was just like a cool arc. Like a real quick arc for Mike's character to kind of establish everything about him as a personality.
Mm-hmm. All right. Fade to black. Rainy afternoon. Mrs. Shoplaw's parlor.
Ooh.
Dramatic. And now we continue our dramatic reading.
I just wanted to try something new.
I like it. I like
Good
it.
work or
No,
not.
I like it.
Okay. So Devin, Miss Shoplaw, and Tina Ackerley, who I think is the librarian or something, they are playing Scrabble. And Devin is getting all of the juicy elderly woman gossip about Ann and Mike. And that's when we kind of find out about her father. And we have that little bit of teaser where we think, oh, here we go. The crazy religious person. And he never comes into play or is really a part of the story at any other point. But there's another interesting development going on here, and that is Devin's conversation with Erin, because she's been researching the Funhouse Killer and has some interesting things to share that she absolutely cannot say over the phone and must shroud in mystery until she comes up in a few weekends.
Because Erin is the detective in this story.
Yeah.
Yep.
This is the book I want to read. I want to read this whole story from Erin's perspective.
So Devin and Mike then end up ganging up on Anne about Joyland, and Devin saves yet another life at Joyland. And this is where I think our favorite Funhouse Killer suspect theory is put to the test. So we'll talk about Eddie first, and then we'll come back to Mike and Anne and how that worked. Yeah, so go for it, Ben.
This is with Eddie Parks. This part jumped out of nowhere at me. This recurring thing of Dev saving people's lives at Joyland. And I believe, if I remember correctly, the segment just starts off with like I walked up to the haunted house or whatever, and Eddie Parks is on the ground just having a heart attack.
Well, he sees him tip over, I believe.
That's right.
So he sees it as it happens.
So that was kind of jarring. And Eddie Parks has a heart attack, and Dev gives him CPR because of his lifeguard training that also gave him anachronistic Heimlich maneuver abilities from earlier in the story.
But he didn't invent CPR.
He did not
Just
know.
like
That
he
was
did not
already
invent
around.
the Heimlich maneuver.
And he doesn't stop there. He does something else to Eddie.
Yeah, the part that pissed me off, he takes off his fucking gloves, and there's no tattoo, and
just psoriasis.
Just psoriasis. And that was, I like threw down the book, and I'm like, I was so looking forward to being right. I have one other note. I believe it's during this section that after all this is happening and Eddie Parks is going to the hospital, there's a part where Dev runs to get some of Eddie's things to bring to him, and it's described as he runs to his little shack, his doghouse in the talk, and I wrote it down in my notes. Okay, I get it, Josh. It did not bother me during the first half of the book. I didn't really notice, but after you pointed it out, every time it happened, I was like, oh, okay, that it does happen a lot.
Vindicated.
Yeah, and so shortly after I was proven wrong, too. It was a real 1-2 punch for me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So when you saw that there were no tattoos, I want your impressions of that moment, and I'm curious about who, if anyone, your suspicions then turned to.
Well, I mean, there are only so many characters it could be.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it is either a stranger, which would be pretty anticlimactic, not really beyond King, but it wouldn't be satisfying. So I assumed it had to be someone at the park, or I guess Miss Shoplaw, but that didn't seem likely.
I mean, she's a lady. We know it was a guy.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. It could be some kind of like pajama. No, not pajama game. That's the wrong reference. You know, the pajama game, that Marilyn Monroe movie where she turns out to be a dude at the end.
Joyland had a real
crying game.
Yeah, the crying game.
No.
I thought you were talking about Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. Joyland turns into...
You killed Ben.
Jesus Christ. That's just how funny Ace Ventura: Pet Detective is. If I'm reminded of it, I'm like,
Holds up. Not at all offensive now, right, guys?
Yeah, completely holds up.
Anyway, to answer your question, when I found out it wasn't Eddie, I actually immediately was like, I guess Josh was right. It must be
Fred Dean.
Who else could it be? So yeah, that's what I thought.
Well, as soon as he went for the gloves, I was wondering if something was going to stop him, like if somebody was going to run up and he was going to realize he was being watched, so he wouldn't do it, and that's what would keep the mystery. But the second he was successfully taking the gloves off, I was thinking, it can't be Eddie because there's a lot of book left, and revealing the killer at this point would really be a weird choice.
How interesting would the book have been if they catch the killer in the middle and then it's just the rest of the book them visiting him in the hospital.
It's a ghost story too, though. So
true.
I mean,
Yeah,
I guess you could. Yep, we wrapped up the killer part, and now we're gonna
deal with the ghost.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's
Which
fair.
turns out to be an anticlimax, in my opinion. We'll get there.
Yeah,
we'll get there.
We'll get to that one. Devin grabs something else when he goes to Eddie's doghouse, as you called it.
I don't know.
Dog locker, dog
In
house,
the
I don't know.
talk, his little fucking shack.
Clearly,
it doesn't matter.
Clearly, it didn't sink in. So, so he finds a photo and he takes that photo to Eddie. And it's Eddie and a woman. They're smiling at each other. And we think, well, I thought that we were going to get this tender moment and insight into this character. When he sees the photo, he asks Devin why he brought it. And he calls the woman a miserable, backbiting cunt. And then he sheds a single tear.
Hey, Eddie's got layers, man.
He does. So we find out that they had a kid. The kid was hit and killed by a car. And as Devin is walking away, Eddie tells him he should have let him die. He could have been with his little girl.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Like, he's a miserable old bastard for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But,
He's earned it.
Man, that last bit of, you should have let me go. I mean, as much as, like, Devin didn't like him and wasn't treated well by him, he did the heroic thing, saving his life.
Yeah,
and to be treated with that level of, like, the return of, like, you should have let me go.
Yeah, it's not... Eddie Parks never gets a redemption in the book,
Eh?
but... Okay, so I'm getting ahead of myself, but, like, in this part, he's not, like, redeemed, but it explains to the core, like, in such a short section, who Eddie Parks is.
Right.
Because up to this point, he's been a caricature, essentially. And King does an amazing... It's a really short little section of Dev visiting him in the hospital, and he does an amazing job of being like, this is who Eddie is. I really enjoyed that part.
We've suddenly turned him into a character we actually care about.
Yeah.
In a matter of 3 pages.
And we'll get to this part at the end, but I forgot about Eddie after this. Did you guys forget about him, or was he still there?
Then more or less.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
it's
I
like,
think that's
okay, he's out of the
interesting,
character.
too.
He was a red herring, essentially.
Yeah,
That's what I thought.
I thought that he had fulfilled his part, and we find out later, no, there's one more thing Eddie's got to do, which we'll get to. Devin then runs into Anne in the hospital, and she's waiting for Mike to finish up an appointment. And when Mike comes out, he and Devin gang up pretty hard on Anne about Mike visiting Joyland. Do you guys think the way Devin treated Anne was fair? I mean, he didn't slap her to try to calm her down or anything, but...
Yeah, this was written 40 years after Carrie, so there was minimal of women slapping. It's I don't know. I thought this scene was weirdly intense, and there's not much build up to it.
I feel like in a way, part of that was excused by Mike's gift, but for the reader, that makes more sense. But for the characters, I didn't know if that quite worked for me.
I felt like this was a scene where their relationship is still very new with Devin and Annie. And this seemed to be like the first time he was approaching her as an equal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I thought this scene was trying to accomplish. That comfortable feeling he had is not accurate. Their relationship is not to this point.
Yeah.
And this was kind of her taking him down a peg.
Maybe that's what I was trying to express, is like, up to this... Devin, I like Devin. He's a good character. He's kind of a wiener. And this standing up for himself came as a bit of a surprise, and I'm like, oh.
Wait a minute. So by that logic, are we supporting his idea earlier with Wendy that he should have been more of a dick and they would have slept together?
Oh, God. Ben?
Ben?
The look on your face.
Okay, I'm sorry. Not fair.
No, it's the fact that it's been so hot and cold between them, with Annie not wanting him to be around. Then when Mike gets a full night's sleep because he had so much fun, she comes around to him a little bit. But that relationship is still, she doesn't want new people coming in. She wants to hold on so tight, which they talk about later, that if they don't do anything, they won't do anything for the last time.
The last fun time.
Right.
Yeah, if she postpones that, Mike won't die. I mean, she knows he will, but it's like that desperation, that mother's grief. Somehow this will keep that inevitable thing from happening.
Yeah, and Devin coming into their lives puts all of that at risk for her. So her irrational responses and the jumps to anger and the escalations make some sort of sense in this scene, because he's really, for the first time, kind of pushing back. And she's like, nope, not doing that. This is your fault. You did this.
So then she relents. She gives in, and they are going to go to Joyland. And Mike and Devin continue to have some interesting conversations about Mike's abilities or insights. And he's telling him that Linda Gray, wants to leave. And he keeps saying it's not white, which it still means nothing to me at this point. It's not white. Devin then talks to Lane because he's like, oh shit, I hope I can actually do this thing I promised them I could do. And Lane tells him to wait until the paper comes out. And I thought Devin's reaction to that was interesting. He's telling him to talk to Fred after the paper comes out about him saving another life at Joyland. And Devin's like, no, I don't want anything to do with that. And he's like, do you want to take them to the park? Well, Fred's going to be way more amicable to your desires if you do that.
Lane essentially carnies the newspaper into being like, have I got a story for you?
Well, I thought that was, it was a really good idea. Lane had a very good point. That's, if you're going to ask for something, you might as well become ingratiated. That's how you got the job here, is you did something and Mr. Easterbrook gave you a favor to call in. So this is how you get things done.
But did you guys notice here, this seemed like the first time Devin was frustrated or put off by Lane in any way?
I literally did not notice.
Okay.
No?
Anything about Lane at any point. The entire book, all I thought was, man, what a cool guy. This guy knows what's up.
I have a surprise for you guys at the end.
Oh, okay. I can't wait to hear it. I hope Lane gets to own the park after Fred gets sent to jail.
Right.
I hope that happens.
Exactly.
That'd be really cool.
Ben didn't finish reading the book.
I forgot.
All right, so Fred, of course, says yes, as long as Lane is going to be around to help them out with everything. Between that time, though, Erin and Tom come to town. And Erin brings Devin a briefcase of different facts about the Funhouse Killer murders. And she's a pretty awesome detective. She's making connections that the police never made. Why they had to go into Joyland to have this conversation? Was it to further the plot, or did I miss something? I don't know.
Yeah, you would think they'd be at Miss Shoplaw's or
a cafe,
anywhere other than inexplicably the closed park. I mean, I guess it makes sense. Erin's returning to visit the park as much as Dev. Like, she's an alumni.
I'll buy that.
But yeah, why they didn't be like, hey, let's go get lunch at somewhere.
At literally any other place.
Yeah.
Why do we have to come to the park to have this conversation? To the scene of
the crime and look at it under... Maybe they wanted to show Linda Gray. Who knows?
Yeah.
Just take it to the...
Hey, look, we're trying.
Yeah, we're trying,
we're doing this.
I don't know if this would be interesting to go through or not. You guys can kind of tell me what you think. But I have the breakdown of the Funhouse Killer facts from Erin.
Yeah, let's cover those. Because I also thought it was very interesting that Erin was able to pull all of this information that the police never put together. And as she was going through the information, I was like, I feel like this should have been done by police. This seems like they're pretty straightforward connections.
I think that's excused, though, by the fact that it was murders occurring across state lines. So
also earlier in the book, they say that the Funhouse Killer killed a bunch of people. I don't think that she's like, look, he killed more than one person.
She didn't break the news story that somebody was killing people at carnivals. Yeah. But given the information she pulls out, narrowing down this, I don't know how the police, with the resources they have, could not have solved this case, as she almost solves it herself.
So there were 4, possibly 5 murders that we know of. And the first was Delight Mowbray from Georgia, white, 21 years old. And a few days before she was killed, she told her friends about a new older man she was seeing. Her body was found in a swamp on August 31st, 1961, with her throat cut. The second, Claudine Sharp, North Carolina, white, 23 years old. Although she didn't mention a new, older boyfriend to her friends, she was found at a theater with her throat cut and a bloody shirt and gloves on the scene on August 2nd, 1963. Eyewitnesses put her there with an older man. Third, Eva Longbottom, who does not match the profile of the other victims, nor was she killed in the same way, and I agree with Erin on this one, so we're not going to count her. So true number
She's
3.
actually killed with the Cruciatus curse. Her parents are still in the infirmary, insane from... Never mind. That's a different podcast, guys.
Okay, third victim, Darlene Stomnacher. I don't know how to say that. Erin would yell at me, too, because she yelled at Devin for messing it up. From North Carolina, white, 19 years old, she disappeared on June 29th, 1967, and was found a few days later with her throat cut. And then Linda Gray makes 4. So Erin also shares that Manly Wellman's show of 1,000 Wonders was in town around the time of the first few murders before it went out of business, and the county fair at the time of the true third murder. Yes, Ben.
I'm sorry. Reading it, it didn't hit me, but hearing the phrase Manly Wellman out loud just struck me funny. Yeah. I apologize to laugh during your murder investigation.
So disrespectful, Ben. These
call
are
me
dead women.
Call me Manly Wellman from now.
So there's something about these photos that bother Devin, but he can't put his finger on it, and no doubt he'll figure it out at a crucial last moment. And they run into our other red herring, Fred Dean, who advises Devin that he better bring Mike and Ann on Tuesday because there's a big storm coming in.
And when Fred Dean comes in and catches them with all these files spread out, that was once again the other point that I full on was like, fuck you, Josh. Yeah, of course. Of course it's Fred now. Red herring number 2.
You guys are adorable.
Red herrings.
That scene happened and I was all in. I was like, I'm 100% right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Let's talk about Joyland. Beautiful, magical day that Devin and Mike and Ann spend at Joyland.
I am a sucker for, don't tell anyone listening, audience, but I am the biggest softie in the world. I will cry at the drop of a hat. Oh my god, do you guys watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine, the wedding episode? Oh my god, I cried. Anyway, that's irrelevant, but there's this this part of the book where Mike and Annie come and visit Joyland, and Fred Dean is there in full Willy Wonka mode.
Doing
totally
straight up
out.
magic.
Such a badass. Just kept thinking, oh man, it's going to be really shocking when he murders Mike or something. Does not happen. But they give them the VIP treatment. They ride all the rides, and I wrote down this one phrase that near this end of this section, Dev is watching Mike ride one of the rides, and Annie watching Mike with tears in her eyes, and he is looking back at it as our narrator, and he says, I go back to it, if only to remind myself that life isn't always a butcher's game. Sometimes the prizes are real. Sometimes they're precious. I had to put the book down and walk away because I was bawling. That got me.
Yeah, it was very touching the whole way through. And I very much anticipated that I was, again, right about Fred Dean because he was such a major part of that. And I was like, yeah, right there, here's what they're doing there. They're bringing this character that we've kind of sprinkled in throughout the beginning. Now we're making him a big part of the finale. So now it's going to sink in. He's going to take this shot. But the lengths they go to, because it's basically just Fred and Lane that are going from one thing to the next, changing costumes and putting all this together, and just going so far above and beyond to make this the best day of Mike's life. And every bit of it was just so touching. And again, we've talked about it before about this book, that you forget that there's a crime involved because so much of it we're reading Devin's memoir, basically. And this was another one of those scenes where the stakes of everything else were completely gone for me, and I was so dialed in on this relationship and this story, and was so happy that they were able to convince Annie that we should do this, and to see everybody go so above and beyond was just really heartfelt, and I loved it.
If it is a last fun time, it is a really good one. And Mike gets to ride Charlie the Choo Choo, right?
Yeah.
Am I stretching it too much? Is that too much?
Wait, did they call it Charlie the Choo Choo?
No.
Okay, because literally you just said that and I got goosebumps. I was like, did I fucking miss that? Holy shit.
I am looking for connections where there probably are none. Oh, another thing that we need to mention, Devin. Okay, so Devin wears a fur for the last time. That's
God.
Beautiful. Oh, go. Do you want to?
The other line is the Devin hugging Mike and whispering in Devin's ear while he's wearing the fur. You make a great Howie, Dev. And I was like, he knows, because he's magic. I loved it.
So Annie shows Devin her sniping skills at Annie Oakley's shooting gallery. That won't come into play later, I'm sure.
That foreshadowing.
That was super fun, though, like giving her like the 10 pellets and she fires, and then she looks at the gun and she figures out, all right, this is what it's off, reloads, and then just bam, 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 bam.
Yeah,
done.
that was awesome.
I was like, well, she's even more of a badass. All right.
And then it happens, the big it.
Oh, we're finally going to meet the ghost. Something supernatural is going to happen, and a door opens.
Oh, come on.
Was I the only one that was kind of like disappointed?
That's not what it's about, though.
I was so confused.
Okay.
Because I expected a bigger spectacle. If I expected that to be the start of something, not the all of something.
Exactly. Well, explain what happens.
So they're going past the haunted house, and the gate at the end of the ride opens, and one of the cars comes out. Just comes out, slows to a stop. And in that car is a headband.
Yeah, the Blue Alice Band.
The Blue Alice Band is sitting in this car.
If we were given the story from Mike's perspective, that would have been a completely different moment, because Mike sees Linda Gray and hears her, and she thanks them. Devin sees nothing, hears nothing.
Yeah, which is kind of interesting, actually. Now that I think about it, I'm changing my mind on this on the spot. Because throughout the whole book, Devin, the reason he stays around is secretly in his heart of hearts is he wants to see Linda Gray. And the entire book, he never gets that.
Yeah.
He does not get what he wants, but
it's what he thinks he needs, but it's not.
It's a metaphor. Because earlier in the book, I had a note. It was during the section when Erin and Tom come to visit, and they're hanging out, and no, it's after he calls Ellen, not is it Erin or Ellen?
Erin.
I wrote down Ellen.
You're great with names.
Really good
so
names.
bad at notes, you guys. He has this moment where he's jealous of Tom, and he says he talks about how he's jealous of Tom for seeing Linda. But it's right after this long conversation with Erin and like thinking about how happy her and Tom get to be. So I really think that like Linda Gray is this stand-in for, he thinks that's what he wants, but what he actually wants is to be happy again, to be over what's her face, and to find and be able to love again.
Yeah.
And so he never gets to see Linda Gray. But earlier in the day at Joyland, he does kiss Annie, which is, his true motivation, even if he doesn't recognize
Foxy
it.
Mommy.
Is she Foxy?
Is she
Dev? So 70s. I'm bringing Foxy
really
back, guys.
Let's do that.
All
Let's
right.
bring Foxy back.
And Linda Gray tells Devin, even though he can't hear her, to be careful. Did that give anything away for you guys when you read that?
No, well, once again, like Josh said, I was expecting action sequence. I was expecting something was going to happen, and the killer would be revealed, and they would be chased into the haunted house, and that would be the big climactic end of the book. So I guess be careful. I was expecting, I don't know, Fred Dean to be like, I have a knife now, and I don't
he's
know.
Magic. He just abracadabra's a
pulls
knife.
it out of his ear, and yeah.
Well, if things had ended there, Devin would not have lost his virginity to Anne later
true.
that day, which was all very lovely. if you guys want to talk about that in detail, knock yourselves out.
The massive eye roll that you just did. We can just move past it.
Okay,
A standard Stephen King
it's okay.
thing.
There's one thing I really need to say about this.
Okay.
And that was, one, how mesmerized that he was that her bra matched her shorts. Was it like whatever else was she, like her bra matched?
She has boobs.
Yeah, he was like just like real like, oh boy.
They do that?
And then the fact that she was like, this is a one night only deal. Like this is it. We're never gonna talk about this, but if you want to, this is happening. And then made a big deal about it. It was one night, but 3 times. And only 2 of them were bad. That's my summary of how I imagine.
That's perfect.
That's so funny. Devin, you're telling us this story. You're the narrator. You be unreliable this time.
I was a stud.
This
You should've
one
just-
time.
You had the opportunity to be like, it went all night. And it was like, no, I was bad at sex. Thanks for telling the truth in your memoir, man, but come on.
I mean,
Once again-
arguably, probably one of the least important parts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beyond establishing, and Stephen King also has, sex is always important in one way or another to
Connect people.
To connect people. He often uses that as a connector, be it good or bad. We see it used in terrible ways during Carrie, but in this way we see that they have this moment and that permanently ties them together, even though their love of Mike also does that. But this having this one night and this action binds them together for life. And he often uses that as that symbolism of like, this is the moment these 2 people irrevocably are in each other's lives.
Yeah, but what's really cool about this scene though is that she does end up opening up about her father and her own fears, and she shares her despair over her belief that there's no life after death, and if she could believe like her father, she would know that she would someday be reunited with Mike. But she knows that it's all just nothing, oblivion. So when Mike is gone, he's gone. That's it. That's all she got. And that kind of touched me.
And brings up a whole ass load of theological questions. Because this is a world where we know for a fact ghosts are real. What does that translate to the afterlife?
And that's what Devin, without telling her, brings up. You know, he said Mike knows it's more than oblivion.
Yeah. And I feel like that conversation is smarter than I am. Like, I'd love to touch on, like, oh, what in a world where there's definitely an afterlife, what could that possibly mean for the theological aspects of the unit? I don't know. There's ghosts, guys.
There are ghosts. And Mike, that's also why Mike isn't afraid. Like,
Right.
yes, he is aware he is sick. He is aware that he is not going to live much longer. He doesn't have 10 to 15 years left, but he's also not worried about it.
Yeah. Go then. There are other worlds than these.
Oh, you beat me to it.
Damn it, Ben.
And thinking about how Linda's ghost was set free, does that make you guys think all the other people who claimed to see her were kind of dicks? All she wanted was to be shown the door, and she was good. That's all she needed. And then, are ghosts dumb? She just stood there like...
Our ghosts.
She didn't have very far to go.
That might be my favorite question I've ever been asked. Are ghosts dumb?
This is just like, I imagine that it's so they always talk about how her arms are out. What nobody tells you is that while her arms are out, she's pointing and
She's
looking
like,
quizzically, like
which
she's
way?
because it's dark in here, guys. The lights are off when I'm out. So do I take a left? is that she's asking for directions.
Right, right.
And she's begging for those directions. No one wants to give them to her.
Thanks,
Devin,
Tom. So smart.
You know, because men don't ask for directions, so that's she's
More
only
power.
asking dudes for it.
I don't think so, Tim.
Tim?
Never mind. Don't worry about it.
Timely home improvement reference.
Oh, I thought you were misremembering Tom's name as Tim.
I have it written in my notes. Ellen and Tim are very happy.
What is it, Billy, Bobby?
I don't know.
Oh my
Okay.
god.
Devin is leaving and he passes a strip mall and he comments that he didn't give the shop so much as a glance as he was driving back, which he says is proof that he didn't have the gift. Meant nothing. I was like, what? What are you talking
I
about?
read that sentence.
I had to read it over
6 times.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Did it mean
it's
anything?
a little clunky.
Later.
Did it?
Yeah, Lane.
'Cause
Because
I have no
Lane,
idea.
Lane is there.
Oh.
Why is Lane there?
That's
Because
where
he
he
calls
calls
him
from that
from-
payphone.
But the killer calls him from that payphone.
Ben, I have
Oh.
some bad news.
You're so
I
sweet.
stopped reading at that point.
You started bawling and you put the book down and walked away.
Devin goes to bed. He wakes up in the middle of the night because of storm. And, now, presumably because he's had sex, this allows his mind to start functioning. And he begins to put all these pieces together. The things, he kept looking at the photos before and there was something that was nagging at him, but he couldn't figure it out. And now he can see it. So he gets dressed. The phone rings.
Dun dun dun.
Thank you, Josh.
You're welcome.
So were you guys surprised to find out who was on the other end?
Well, we didn't find out who was on the other end during this
Until- yeah.
conversation.
Well,
Until
he did write the name down. Like the reader didn't get it, but he wrote a
But
note to Mrs.
yeah.
Shoplaw, which I thought
Just in
was
case.
smart.
Yeah.
Although I also think, in addition to that note, he should have run out of the house screaming, Mrs. Shoplaw, so that she would wake up and see it before he was dead.
Yeah. Yeah, he makes a point of, like, not waking her up. He,
Yeah.
like, closes her door so the light won't wake her up. And then he figures out who the murderer is, and he's like, oh, but she's sleeping. No, just wake her up, you dummy. Have her run and call the police. Like,
I highlighted my favorite line, my favorite back and forth in this phone conversation, because it again goes back to the thing that drives me nuts about Devin's older self writing this book. He says, because Devin says that he can't prove it, because they've had the discussion, you know who I am, you know what I've done. And he says, but I can't prove it. And the voice responds, probably not, but it would only be a matter of time. You can't unring the bell. Do you know that old saying? And his response is, sure. I didn't, but at the moment, I would have agreed with him if he'd declared that Bobby Rydell, and in parentheses, a yearly performer at Joyland, was president. Why? Why is that? Why is that the... You could have told me that...
literally
that
any example. No parentheticals needed.
John Bon Jovi was the first man on the moon. Sure. Cool.
I get that.
These are like this extreme, but like to use somebody who's only a reference
Who has not been brought
Not
up in
mentioned
the
in the
book
book
at all.
ever, which is why the parentheticals needed. I imagine old Devin writes it and is like, clever, and then his editor sends it back and is like, who the fuck is Bobby Rydell? And he's like, I'll fix that. His editor meant change the analogy, but he just wrote down a yearly performer at Joyland.
It's a technique.
Save, send, gone.
What did you guys... Okay, were you surprised? I just want to know what you thought, because I really liked Lane Hardy. Then again, all the women love Lane Hardy.
I was surprised, which is in itself surprising because, like I said, there were only like 3 people it could have been. And I was still like, holy shit, I can't believe that there was leading up to that. You're like, okay, it's Fred or Lane. It has to be.
Yeah, I was dead set that it was Fred. I wouldn't, if I put all my eggs in that basket and all the way until the end, it really could have been. And then when it was Lane, my first thought was, no.
Yeah, it was.
I was so bummed.
Yeah. Let's talk about the final showdown, which takes place on the Carolina Spin.
Let's talk
Before
about...
we get to that,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
can we talk about the big clue that made Devin figure it out?
Oh, yeah.
Also,
it's not white.
We also didn't go over the fact that we didn't even talk about the tattoo.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
The
'cause
tattoo is fake. Okay, moving on.
I have... Yeah, okay, so he's looking at the photos and he notices that in the photo, the killer keeps flipping his hat back and forth, which is something that Lane does constantly. And he and Erin brings up that the tattoo is running, so it's a fake tattoo. Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't get to that because I actually I had gone back through the book to look for clues, and I have like a specific number of clues I feel like there are that all point to Lane.
Okay, cool.
Just, you guys do so much more work in this podcast than I do. I read it once and I'm like, yep, that was good.
Yeah, that covers it. That being the definitive thing. Oh, the hat back and forth must be Lane.
Yeah, and that does. It's like, oh, okay, that's the clue. That's how he figures it out. But I just want to imagine in real life, you know someone who always wears a hat, and the thing that when you think of this person, it's just him tipping his hat back and forth. So much so that it is a distinctive character trait. I would want to hit that guy. I had never... And when it comes up throughout the book, he'll be like in the middle of a conversation, he tilts his hat to the side, all cocky-like. And I'm like, oh, what a cool move. But it didn't occur to me until the end that he must be doing this, like... 3 or 4 times a conversation. That he's like, every sentence he makes, he's like, hey, how you doing there? Tip. Hey, I think you should go get a coney dog. Tip. And it's like, Jesus Christ, Lane, chill out with the hat.
Ben, for one day, I want you to wear a hat and every other sentence, tip it. And see how mad you get and how many people you murder in a funhouse.
No, I will guarantee I will be beaten to death by someone by the end of the day. Knock it off!
What do you guys think of Lane's pitch as he's forcing Devin onto the ride? It's apply some strain and use your brain. Up the ramp, champ.
I love that he just continues rhyming.
Yeah. Here's my question. What the fuck is Lane's plan?
Murder-suicide?
Yeah, Dev says he must be, like, he's gonna shoot me and then kill himself.
Yep.
Why? Because Lane says, he's like, I can disappear. Lane's not my real name.
Yeah, but he has Devin throw there's like a remote that's controlling the spin. That's how they get on it, and then it moves.
Yup.
And he has Devin throw that over the side.
Why? Why?
He's crazy, Ben.
He has lost his mind.
Yeah.
Well, the whole thing with the Alice band has like thrown him so hard because that's his whole phone conversation is like, I don't know how you did that, but I know you did it, which means you know it's me, which we've got to say the timing is pretty perfect that he didn't get the phone call till just after he'd figured it out. Imagine if that phone call had woken Devin up and he hadn't had the time like, and would have authentically been like, no, I literally don't know, instead of having just figured it out.
Yeah.
Real timing issue right there.
That's true.
But imagining that Alice band just completely he thought he was totally fine, and then he sees that as something that was thrown in his face, being like, I've got you figured out.
Yeah, that makes sense. He's a crazy person, he's a serial killer, blah blah blah. But the whole end, that's all I kept thinking is like, okay, so now they're on the Carolina spin. What's the plan here,
and
man?
I don't think that Lane put it past Devin to not write down his name or leave a note or say something.
Then shoot him in the parking lot.
That would put him in that place. Like I think that he's gonna get more satisfaction out of luring Devin into the scenario, but he already knows Devin might call the cops. He might leave his name. I think he at this point feels trapped.
And it's a very dramatic scene.
Can we talk about his death? Because you guys, I had a nightmare the night I finished the book, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and all I can remember from it is the Carolina spin.
Really?
It was real intense.
It was
that whole scene, because unlike any other book or movie where usually it's, the hero takes the moment or makes them, he does like on purpose make him angry to kind of throw him off, but he constantly is saying how he can't think straight because he is terrified because this can go the other way in an instant because he is trapped on this ride. The man's got a gun and there's nothing he can do about it.
Yeah, pretty much guaranteed he was dead, if not for.
Annie had to rescue him.
Yeah, at the very top of the Carolina spin,
with the storm.
With the storm going. It's very cinematic. I won't argue that. It's just a dumb plan. But right at the top, there's a crack of a gunshot, and he looks, and Lane has a bullet just dead center of his face, and he falls
through
down.
his nose, right?
Yeah.
Because his nose is gone, and like the top of his teeth are gone. I was like, wait, that's a nice graphic end, because he tries to talk and like chokes on his teeth.
And then this brings us back to Eddie, because we find out that Anne only knew to go help Devin because Eddie died that night.
Fucking Eddie Parks.
Yep, and his ghost appeared to Mike, and what did he say? The kiddo needs your help or something. He didn't even call him by his name, but Mike knew.
Yeah.
And so she came to his rescue. I thought it was cool. I liked it.
I liked that a lot. Because he asks Mike, did Linda Gray tell you? And he's like,
that's who I would have assumed.
Linda Gray's gone. Like, she's out of here. But yeah, this old man that called you kiddo and said you needed help. And I was like, well, shit. So yeah, what I said earlier, he does get his redemption. Yeah. Eddie Parks ends up saving the day.
And is it because Devin visited him because he brought him the photo? We don't know. And I like that we don't know.
Yeah.
It's like we don't have to know everything. So as we're wrapping up here, can I bring up 2 points? And the first is, why didn't Roz know? I mean, Lane tells Devin the first day that they meet that he's never let her read his palm, but she told Devin things without reading his, and she's been working with this guy, so...
Yeah, she doesn't really have...
Literally everything she said to Devin came true.
Yeah, that's true.
It was 100%.
That is true.
And it's pretty well established that her tent is right next to the spin. They basically established that her and Lane are best friends.
And they're the ones who pulled Devin aside too.
I had never thought of that. Because Devin says, well, I don't know if she had the ability like Mike did, but she did have that classic Carney ability to read people and to infer information from that. And there's not a scene in the book, I don't think, where Roz isn't hanging out with Lane. I never even thought of that. Way to go, idiot.
Oh, and I forgot. I was pissed about the clue that it's not white thing, because Mike was referring. I mean, he didn't know what he was referring to, but it ended up being his hair, because Lane had dyed his hair, and his dye is coming off. And all I could think was, have you not heard of permanent hair dye? There's hair dye that will not come out in a storm down your neck.
It's the 70s. Maybe he just... It was all
skeptical face.
Shoe black, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Okay, so I found 18 what I think are clues throughout the book. Okay, that's counting all the cap tilts. It mentions it. I didn't realize that, the whole book that's in there. If you don't count those, or you count 1 or 2 or something, it's probably about half that. But he does tilt his cap all the time. He does reference taking out girls 10 years younger than him. He walks away when Roz starts talking to Devin about how it's a girl, and they're telling Devin he needs to eat. He's kind of piss off, Roz, and walks away. And as Erin and Devin are talking about the killer, there's just a line that talks about the wind through the struts of the spin. And then, of course, Devin notices the white strands of hair.
So that's what's not white.
Yeah, because he thought it was
that's why I was upset about that earlier.
But it is white.
Well, it's blonde.
Right.
But he thought
we should have said it's not
black because it is white. So why is it's
Which leads us back to our question: are ghosts dumb? And I believe we found our answer here.
I cannot believe that's what it is pertaining to.
Yeah, because it's a weird clue. He keeps coming back to that. It's not white. What do you mean, Mike? I don't know. All right, unless you guys have anything else you need to get in.
I do have one more thing that I really liked at the end of the book, the way he summarizes all of his book this whole year. And he says, "This was the year I got my damn heart broke, the year I lost my virginity, the year I saved a nice little girl from choking and a fairly nasty old man from dying of a heart attack. The first one, at least. The year a madman almost killed me on a Ferris wheel. The year I wanted to see a ghost and didn't. Although, I guess at least one saw me. That was also the year I learned to talk a secret language and how to dance the hokey pokey in a dog costume. The year I discovered that there are worse things than losing a girl.
That's sweet.
It is, but not everything on that list is on the same level.
Okay, Ben. How many blue chambray shirts?
I really liked this book. I did not expect to, especially it was tough getting into, but once I did, it really sucked me in. And for maybe being a little slow starting, I'm gonna go ahead and give it 4 out of 5 blue chambray shirts.
Josh?
I will also give it 4. It would be 5 if it were not for how angry I am at Devin's writing. That just so many of those things drive me so nuts that I can't all in good conscience give it a 5.
I've mentioned this before. I'm giving it 5.
Of course you are.
I like hard-boiled fiction, crime novels. The story and the characters were really provoking, and I had a lot of emotion while reading about them, and I really did not want Lane to be the killer. And this story has kind of stuck with me over the years. Like, so many in his universe, the characters now feel like they are a part of me, and they live inside me somewhere and kind of pop out every once in a while. That sounds really creepy. I didn't mean it to be. So, yeah, 5.
Perfect.
Love it. CM, if you'd like to introduce the people to our next book.
Yeah, we are reading The Dark Half, guys.
The Dark Half.
Be excited.
I'm so jazzed about this. I've heard so many good things. Another book, big surprise, I haven't read it. And so I'm just so excited.
So we're reading through chapter 16. So page 314 is where you got to stop. It is about a author named Thad Beaumont.
Yes.
Am I pronouncing that
Thaddeus
correctly?
Beaumont.
Yep. And he has been writing under pseudonym George Stark. He's written his own books, but he has this George Stark that is like this #1 best-selling author. He writes these really, as I understand it, raunchy crime novels. Mm-hmm. He decides that he is going to kill George.
Which has some interesting parallels to King's actual life, which I'm so excited to talk about.
Yeah, so he decides to kill George, and it's when he makes that decision that things start getting really, really interesting in his life.
Yeah, no, definitely. I love this book. Very excited to get started with it in our next episode.
Yeah. So thank you guys for listening. For CM Alexander and Manly Wellman, I am Joshua Kahn.
Long days and pleasant nights.
Good night, everyone. Hey everyone, CM Alexander here. Join us for our next episode where we explore the first 16 chapters of The Dark Half. Since we don't have an episode 3 for you this time, because there's no movie, yet, we've included a bonus news story at the end of this outro, so stay tuned. As always, send us your comments on Facebook and Instagram at Derry Public Radio, or on Twitter at Derry Public. We may use your comments or give you a shout out on an upcoming episode. Send any questions, comments, or complaints, minus the complaints, to us at derrypublicradio@gmail.com. And please subscribe and review us. We certainly appreciate it. Until next time, goodbye, readers. And remember, the last good time always comes. And when you see the darkness creeping toward you, hold on to what is bright and good.
Welcome back to Derry Public Radio. Reporting from the basement of the Derry Civic Center, this is Joshua Kahn with your news. Joyland Theme Park has issued a missing persons report for Linda Gray. Famously murdered in the theme park years ago, the haunting attracted visitors from all over the country. The ghost seems to have left the attraction and is missed by the staff. So listeners, if you come across an ethereal woman in a blue Alice band, holding her hands out as if asking for directions, please point her to North Carolina. You're listening to Derry Public Radio.